All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. It looks like the cold weather's held off, so that's great. And hopefully the bright smiles from hearing about the program will warm up the room. This is the first information session we're doing here in London to announce the federally funded Investment Readiness Program. These info sessions are happening all across Canada right now through various regional partners that have been tasked with execution on this Investment Readiness Program. I'll be one of the co-hosts. My name is Vijay. I'm a staff member with the London Community Foundation, and along with my co-hosts, my colleague Laurie Runciman and Andrea Dix, who's here from the Community Foundations of Canada, we'll walk you through the investment readiness programs and several components of what we think are going to be important for you to know as you decide or hopefully will apply for this program. So just by a show of hands so we know, if you're a registered charity, could you put up your hand, please? Incorporated not-for-profit? Co-op of some type? And a for-profit business that identifies yourself as a social purpose organization. Okay, excellent. You should all be here, so that's good. All right, so here's the agenda for today. So we've tried to follow a framework that all the regional partners have been doing across the country. It gives you a good overview of the program and some specifics. However, we've only set aside about 40 to 45 minutes for the presentation. Where we really think the value of today is in the Q&A afterwards and the networking. And really what we're hoping to do, and I've had a chance to talk to some of you, is really kind of connect with you one-on-one so we could really understand what your idea is or what your organization's about. Here in London, we're really hopeful that as many of the applications that apply can get access to the funding. We'd love to see more social enterprises succeed here in London, Ontario, because there's no shortage of ideas and no shortage of need, and we know that all too well. Hopefully you've had a chance to see the application. It is very comprehensive. That is by design, and it's just to make sure we give you a good opportunity to really highlight everything about your business onto paper to make sure that it's a fair and transparent process for the adjudication process. But because it is comprehensive and there's over 40 questions, we're not going to go through the application in detail today. However, what we will do is we'll give you some of the key considerations and the lenses with which you should be using when you apply, as well as Laurie's going to walk you through the adjudication process so you know some of the key timelines and guidelines for submitting. So before we do all that, we're going to give you a little background on who the London Community Foundation is so you can better understand why we were selected as a regional partner and why community foundations across Canada have been selected as a regional partner to support on this initiative, because it is very much aligned with our mission and our vision. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my boss, CEO and President Martha Powell, who's going to give you a little bit of background about the foundation.
Good morning and happy snow day, except it's not, but thank you for all of you who came in and ventured, even walking. It was a little treacherous this morning. So London Community Foundation is a public foundation that we've been around since 1954, really active since 1979. We support charitable giving in Middle London and Middlesex primarily. We do expand our reach with donor engagement in some cases, but primarily our focus is London and Middlesex. We are collaborative. Our mission is collaboration, strategic leadership, innovative solutions to charitable giving. We invest in perpetuity. The foundation ensures the long-term viability of the community. So we're an endowment foundation that donors invest through us. We endow the money in perpetuity. We invest it, and it's the income that we use to make our grants. So we have over $1 million or $100 million in assets invested, and generate last year probably about $4 to $5 million in grants into the community. We're also doing a long, strong push into affordable housing in our community. I'm sure most of you are aware that's a very high priority. We have 3 buckets that we prioritize our work into. Buckets are probably a really good way to put it. Community impact. So we work as a catalyst through our granting program, creating change. Often our grant program will try and stimulate collaborations and business development and things that we think would elevate grant applicants to a level where they can be more sustainable and have more impact. We provide a great deal of extensive, deep donor service to our donors. It's our donors that enable us to do what we do. They're our priority number one, and we steward them very well. We make sure that they have the ability to be hands-on granting, to see and touch and feel the impact they're having in their community. And it's often we're referred to as one-stop shop. Instead of giving to one organization, they're giving to us, through us, to a variety of organizations. We are very fiscally responsible. We do apply strong due diligence and prudent investment because we're here for the long haul. So Vijay and his team lead our financial side of the house very well. And we're here forever, and I think that's the important part of what people sometimes don't understand is that we don't, different from the United Way where they will spend and grant what they raise each year. We invest what we raise each year and then just use the income. I want to thank the team that has put this together. As Vijay said, it has been a tight timeline. So thank you all for, jumping into the cause. But with us today, and I'll just ask you to raise your hand, is Lori Runciman, Vijay, Vanessa, Cassandra, who was out front, or she's right at the back there, and Nick, who's not with us. I think the timeline made him sick, so he's not here. I do want to congratulate and invite Andrea Dix to come from Community Foundations of Canada. But I want to offer congratulations. Andrea was just appointed as the president of Community Foundations of Canada. So warm applause and welcome to Andrea. And thank you for coming, Andrea.
Thanks so much, Martha. So this is day 3. So it's day 3, but I'll be honest. It's day, that is so bright. It's been 10 years. I've been part of the Community Foundation movement for 10 years. And in fact, today is the 10-year anniversary. So happy to be in London. I actually started working in similar shoes to the LCF team. I was the executive director of a community foundation and did that for a number of years just down the 401 in Peterborough, Ontario. And so delighted to make the move into the national scope about 6 years ago and be part of the CFC team for the last 6 years. So have had the opportunity to be here in London with the team, get to know the team, and most importantly, see the amazing work that is happening across the community. And so congratulations for all the incredible things that have been happening here. It's a delight to always come and hang out with the LCF team. So thank you for having me here today. So I do have a job to do today, but I don't have the clicker. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to stand. I'm sorry. Is it okay if I stand right here? Oh, thank you. I like this informalness. So this is, I actually did an information session on the Investment Readiness Program last night with the Oakville Community Foundation, who's part of another consortium of community foundations who are activating this initiative. As Vijay mentioned, it's happening all across the country, and there are 24 consortiums of community foundations and partners who have come together in order to deliver this really exciting program. And the Investment Readiness Program, the reason why it is so exciting is because it is on the edge of the Social Finance Fund. So the Investment Readiness Program was designed after the federal government made the announcement of the Social Finance Fund. Who's familiar with that announcement? Raise your hand. Okay. So a few years ago, the federal government made an announcement that they wanted to help support the marketplace of social finance across the country. And so they were preparing to put $755 million into a social finance fund that would be delivered for investment capital into social enterprise through social purpose businesses or organizations. And so that fund has not launched yet. In the wisdom of a few, prior to the launch of it, there was a desire to work with social purpose organizations who are running social enterprises to help them prepare for that infusion of capital. There's not a lot known about the Social Finance Fund. I think it's still in its design phase, which means we have the opportunity to influence it a little bit. But what is hypothesized is that it will begin this year, that it will roll out in a series of 10-year tranches, so totaling about $75 million each year, and that it is repayable capital. Now, the Investment Readiness Program has been designed to, again, prepare organizations to access that capital. The great thing about the Investment Readiness Program, it is non-repayable capital, meaning it operates in a similar way that if you've received a grant from LCF in the past, you would be familiar with. Who has received a grant from LCF in the past, from the London Community Foundation? Wonderful. Okay, some good friends in the room. And some new friends. So the non-repayable capital of the IRP is designed to help organizations move along the continuum of preparation for investment. The size and scope is from 10,000 to 100,000. The total that is being delivered across the country does equal about $50 million. Through community foundations, it's $18.5 million. And that is over the next 15 months across the full country. The other organizations, there's a delta there between the 50 million and the 18.5. There are other organizations who are also investment readiness partners, and those include organizations such as the National Association of Friendship Centers, the Canadian Women's Foundation, NACA, and specifically an organization in Quebec that is working across that particular province. So community foundations are the most active across the full country and the ones who are really activating local organizations with open calls. But if you do hear about other partners, just wanted you to have that context. You're going to give me the nudge, VJ, if I'm talking too much, right? Okay. So I've already said this, so I'm just going to skip through it. So this is the vision of the IRP. Can everyone read that? Yeah? Okay. It's just my tired eyes. I've only had 3 sips of my coffee. But are we going to share the slides afterwards? We are. Okay, perfect. So if you don't get everything this morning, then you'll have the opportunity not only to receive the slides, but there's also been some webinars that have been happening. So on Monday, the CFC team hosted a webinar. We had over 700 people attend the webinar. It was recorded, and so you can access that on the Community Foundations of Canada website, which goes into a very similar narrative to what we're sharing here this morning. So the vision is to have social enterprises apply for non-repayable capital, which is what we've been talking about. The idea of that capital, again, is to help social enterprise move along the investment readiness continuum. So whether you have an idea for a social enterprise or whether you have been operating a social enterprise for years and are looking to scale it, this all applies to all. An important element of this is that we are not looking for a certain stage of development of social enterprise, in that we are not looking to prioritize a certain stage. We're really looking for that diverse applicant pool of organizations that are from everywhere from the idea phase into the phase which would be scale is probably the furthest along. So I think that that's an important distinction as you're thinking about where you're at in your journey of your social enterprise. The capital will be received in the spring, and so the idea is that applications opened, the portal opened, which is a national portal, which means everyone across the country is using the same portal. It opened last Wednesday, January 8th. It closes on February the 10th. From there, we'll move into the adjudication process, which the LCF team is going to walk you through, and decisions will be made in April. So the social enterprise received the capital. do the amazing work with the capital, work with expert service providers to help move through that continuum. We're going to give a few examples of what you might apply for to help you move along. It's important to note that because this is about moving you along the investment readiness continuum, this is not funding for core operating costs. So it's really looking at how do you take the next step wherever you are in that continuum for the development of your social enterprise. You then, of course, receive the funding, report back on the funding. The social enterprises who are successful develop a plan to accept investments, so that's moving through that particular continuum. And then, of course, the social finance market will open, or the social finance fund will come to be. There's, of course, a much broader social finance market in Canada that we're all familiar with, I believe. But with the infusion of the social finance fund, the idea is that that market will significantly grow. And so to have more organizations ready to accept that investment capital and continue to do the amazing work that you're doing to really address the challenges, whether it's social challenges, environmental challenges, cultural challenges in your particular community through the social enterprise. So as I mentioned, this is still me, right, Vijay? As I mentioned, CFC is a regional partner. There are a few other regional partners nationally, and then there are the community foundation consortiums that have come together. And so the regional partnership that is here is with the Hamilton, London, and Niagara Community Foundations, as well as the McMaster Innovation Park. So there's an allocation currently of $1 million. In this first tranche, it will be about $500,000 that is awarded across the region to the successful applicants. There will be a second tranche in which the remainder will be delivered into organizations. It's expected, the dates have not been confirmed, but it's expected that that will be in the fall. So the good news is if the timing of this first round, which we do acknowledge is tight, if you're not ready and want to take more time, you will have a second opportunity in the fall. So what is IRP for? As I mentioned, the idea is really to ensure that we are preparing social purpose organizations that are operating and running a social enterprise or have a desire to operate and run a social enterprise for investment capital in the future. It's to move along that particular continuum. Vijay is going to talk a little bit more about social enterprise and how we're defining social enterprise in this particular program. The original sort of hand-raising exercise earlier today was particularly important because the definition of social enterprise is across for-profit, nonprofit, charitable entities. And so that diversity, again, really is supportive of the full market. And again, we are not looking to prioritize one particular type of incorporated entity over another. We're looking for that full spectrum and full diversity. I think I'm going to turn it over to Vijay at this point. Thank you.
All right. I got to go back behind the podium because I'm not as confident with notes. Now, if I was doing math tricks with a calculator, I could be out there doing stuff. But so as you're looking at the application, there's lots of terminology in there. So what we thought we'd do is just highlight some of the key terms to make sure that it's clearly understood what's the definition for the IRP process. If when you came in, hopefully you were able to see that there is a glossary of terms, so you can always refer to that. It's also available online. But the two ones we thought are the most important to start with is really what is the definition of social finance. So social finance is really any investment that has a financial return, but there's also an active way to be able to do a social, cultural, or environmental impact as well. And then a social enterprise really is an organization that has as part of their mission a desire to get revenue through the sale of goods and services and use that revenue to have that social impact in their mission. Becomes very important, as Andrea mentioned, because social purpose organizations, especially for profit, we really want to kind of identify what's a for-profit social purpose organization versus a social responsible organization or corporate social responsibility. There is a little bit of a distinction. So, who is eligible? So registered charities, just by your nature, and incorporated not-for-profits, you are eligible. So really for the registered charities and the incorporated not-for-profits, really what you're trying to do is just really try to demonstrate that you have a way to be able to generate revenue through the sale of goods and services. This is very similar for our co-ops as well. For the for-profit social enterprises, what you're really trying to do is make sure that you're demonstrating that you have an intent in your mission to take a portion of your revenue and use that revenue to have a social impact. That is the key. The distinction between a social responsible business is really a social responsible mandate is really you're trying not to do any harm. It's through your practices, whether it's your HR practices and your hiring policies, being inclusive, making sure you have good diversity, making sure you've got pay equity initiatives, there's no gender gap in pay, your procurement policies, use a social procurement policy of making sure the integrity of all the vendors you work with, or whether it's making sure as an organization you don't have a negative environmental impact as well with your footprint. Those are all great things, but those are aspects of a social responsible business or corporate social responsibility, not necessarily a social purpose organization. I think the biggest thing we're saying we're distinguishing is if you're a social purpose organization, again, as a for-profit, you intentionally are trying to solve a problem. And then what's important, who isn't eligible? If you're a sole proprietor, you're not eligible for the IRP funding. If you do not have a business registration number, you're not eligible for funding. And if you're a municipal or provincial government agency, you cannot directly apply for funding as well. You can work with an SPO, it's considered a conflict because this is a federal funded program. So now we know who's eligible and who's not eligible. Let's take a look at all the eligible activities. So this is definitely not a comprehensive list by any means, but definitely what you could see is the breadth of the types of activities that are identified as eligible activities. And what it really kind of highlights is what Andrea was mentioning is that it's this spectrum. And if you're looking at the application, it could be a little bit complicated. There's 5 stages that the application is defining. And I'm just going to read them out in how they've got the terminology and then put it into layman's terms. So stage 1, they call early stage innovation. Stage 2, strategic impact focus. Stage 3, impact sustainability. Stage 4, financial resilience. And stage 5, investor readiness. So they're asking you as an organization, or if you have a program within your organization, to identify where you would be. But if I put this into simple terms, the way I look at it is stage 1 is if you're a stage 1 business, you have an idea. There's a good or service that you feel you could generate revenue from, and you think with that revenue, you could put it to good use. Stage 2, you're just trying to determine how big is this idea? Who are your customers? Who are your competition? What's the market size? What's your value proposition? How do you differentiate yourself to promote what you're trying to do? And stage 3 is really around measuring your impact. If you're a for-profit business, it's fairly easy. Sales, you've got your bottom line you want to do, there's a market share you want to do, but when you add social impact into it, you're trying to define what's your social impact, how you're going to measure that impact, and so that ability to know where you can collect that data and get that data becomes a critical part of stage 3. And stage 4, financial resilience, it's just a fancy way of saying you're up and running. You have a business, it may not be profitable, it may be profitable, you're generating revenue, you have costs, you've got an operating structure that allows you to do your day-to-day, you're open for business, whether virtually or brick and mortar. And stage 5, this investor readiness, scale up, that's really just saying you have a sustainable business. You are cash flow positive, things are working well, and the only thing now you're looking for, if you now are going to move to past stage 5, is you want to replicate your model. It's working well in London, now you want to do it in Hamilton or Kitchener, or you just want to scale it up in London and you need access to capital, but because you're cash flow positive, you have that ability to do that. So hopefully that helps, because I know when I looked at the application form, I found it a little bit challenging at first, and I try to simplify things the best I can. So more importantly, ineligible use of funds. So as Andrea was mentioning, anything that is really just around your operating costs would not be eligible. So your rent costs, cost for permanent staff, cost of just normal costs of doing business, acquisitions of buildings are not included as well. And if it's any activity that's going to take place outside of Canada, it would be excluded as well. And again, provincial or municipal government agencies cannot apply as well. All right, so what are some of the key considerations? So when you're doing the application, the 40 plus questions you've got to fill out, we think these are the key lenses with which to use when you're putting pen to paper to really be able to express on paper what your business is. So the first one is really defining what is your social impact, whether it's social, cultural, or environmental, the ability to be able to kind of say what problem you are trying to solve and how you're going to solve it and why it's a problem that needs to be solved. You need to get out there. And what the application allows you to do is it allows you to use the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It highlights all the 17 UN SDGs. And so hopefully it'll give you a little bit of guidance then on where you want to be able to demonstrate your impact. We do have that in the materials we handed out. There's no shortage of information online as well if you need to learn more about the UN SDGs. But essentially all it is all the United Nations members, Canada being one of them, came together to look to see what we could do to make the planet a better place. And by 2030 came up with these 17 areas that we would all try to tackle together. And what is the enterprise? How will revenue be generated through goods and services? So for most, this is pretty easy. I think the key becomes is where you are pre-revenue. And so if you're a registered charity or a not-for-profit, or you are a for-profit business that is the idea stage, your ability to be able to show to us how you plan on generating revenue, the price of that revenue, the units you think you'll be able to do or the services you'll be able to provide, you just really need to be able to highlight that. If it's already an existing revenue generating business, you have it, it's really about scale. It's more just in helping us understand what the opportunity is and how you think with the non-repayable capital, you'll be able to get that opportunity. And then what is the need for the non-repayable capital? So as you saw, there is such an extensive list of activities that are eligible. And so what's going to be important is your ability to be able to put a budget and cost estimates for each of the items you're going to be requesting. And some of these can be very, very difficult. If you've never done a feasibility study before, it can be a challenge. If you've never done web design, how do you get those costs? So what the federal government has done is it's given 6 agencies, expert service providers, that you can work with if you choose to. These are national organizations that are being given funding to help applicants with how to properly assess these costs and in supporting them really with the application. You don't need to use them, but I would highly at least recommend that you visit their websites and reach out to them because they are there to help. But if you want to work with local expert providers, that's a great thing to do. Because if you think about the long-term prospect of your business, it's always good to be local because you have close proximity. They more likely will understand who you are. And that chance of a longer-term relationship is there. There are some great consultants here in the city, great accounting firms in the city, great lawyers in the city, great financial institutions in the city. The bigger thing we really want to see is that you have done that due diligence in your costing for what you're requesting the funds for, and you've reached out to some multiple sources. And then what do you need to become investment ready? This could be a hard one if you're at the early stage. So really all they want to see is what do you see as the long-term vision for your organization if you were to receive the non-repayable capital? What do the next steps look like? There's no timelines. It doesn't have to be something that you say could be done in a year, 2, 3 years, but they just want to see that you have a plan to, again, as Andrea mentioned, be ready for the social finance fund when it comes, because again, it's going to be an amazing opportunity for a lot of social enterprises to access what we think will be very flexible and favorable financing. So we have a couple of examples. Now we know every social purpose business is different. Every social enterprise is different. This is just really to kind of highlight a couple of examples of how we're looking for. It is along those 4 questions, so hopefully it helps. Happy to say one of these is a real example here in the city. I won't embarrass the person because he's here, but Andrew. So the first one is, and I got to skip to my notes. All right, so the first one is a catering business. So here's a charity that saw the need for skills, training, and employment opportunities and a way to provide nutritious meals for participants that needed it. So what they did is they identified a catering business. The social need was really around reducing hunger, quality in education, decent work, and economic growth. So then they identified that a catering business could be a potential solution. So the need for the non-repayable capital was really around funds for a business plan to determine its viability. And then the long-term plan led to an investment to renovate the kitchen facilities. So that's one example. Second example is an indigenous fish farm. So the objective here for a band was to try to increase employment opportunities and revenue to the band. So how they were going to do this is through outsourcing their processing facilities. So again, around the social impact, it's decent work and economic growth, reduced inequalities, life below water, and responsible consumption and production. And so what they needed the non-repayable capital for was to scale up their existing aqua farm. And then the long term was really the processing for the plant capital equipment. All right. And the last example. So here we have a faith-based organization. They're an aging congregation, but they have good land and good physical space. They didn't want to see no use happen with the surplus space. They wanted to preserve it. They saw an opportunity in the community for an art-based community hub, which was lacking in the area. So here we've got good health and well-being, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So they needed a business plan to determine its viability in the short term for the non-repayable capital and long term a capital investment required for renovations and upgrades. So again, just a few examples that just to kind of highlight short and long term and how you can, in a few words, because sometimes I know in an application 20, 30 words doesn't seem like a lot, but that's how you can initially really identify what your social purpose and your social impact. So now I'm going to hand it over to Lori, and she's going to walk you through the application process.
Good morning, everyone. And my portion is short and sweet because, as Andrea said, the application is quite comprehensive. So we're not going to bore you with all the details. I did run through it myself, so I've tested it out, and I just wanted to highlight a few things about it. But first, I got ahead of myself a little bit. So I just wanted to highlight that Community Foundations of Canada is encouraging applications from rural areas, Indigenous-led and focused organizations, linguistic minorities, newcomers to Canada, and other minority communities. On Community Foundations of Canada's website, there is a whole resource library, lots of information available there. So SurveyMonkey Apply is the platform that the application is being hosted on. And when you register and then begin, first you're going to run through some questions that are going to confirm your eligibility. And then it will move you forward and ask you again some more questions to confirm what type of organization you are. So if you fall into the charity qualified donee area or the non-qualified donee. Qualified donee is a Canada Revenue Agency term, and they've specifically identified which organizations fall into those two categories, and there's a specific set of questions for each. And then, yes, you carry on with your application, which, yes, it is a lot of questions, but it is there to help you develop your idea and draw out those key considerations that VJ reviewed. The timeline is short for this first round. So yes, the deadline is February 10th. And so between now and the 10th, we're available to you. And in addition to this morning to talk with you, you're welcome to also schedule a time to chat with VJ and I specifically about your situation so that we can help you work through developing your application. March 16th. So London is part of a consortium with Hamilton and Niagara. And March 16th is the date by which we need to have our funding recommendation decisions confirmed and then communicated to Community Foundations of Canada, who will then verify those decisions. And then the funding will begin to flow from CFC to the regional partners, and then to the successful applicants. The funding will be in their hands in May. There will be subsequent rounds if this timeline just isn't going to work out. And again, our website's all there. The webinar that was held on Monday, it was excellent. We've embedded it onto our website as well to make it really easy for you to view. It really gives you the nuts and bolts and a good overview of all the aspects. So if you would like to book a time to chat with VJ and I, please contact Linda Turner, and that information's on our site as well.